Welcome to 20th Century Music and Arts. Now, I remember being in a music store in Michigan in 1990, trying to decide what to buy. I looked at the cassette tapes that were on the wall when I came across Funhouse by Iggy Pop's band, the Stooges. Now, I was familiar with the songs Search and Destroy and Gimme Danger from the Raw Power album, but I'd really not heard any of their other material. I knew they were an important band in the progression of punk rock. So, I purchased the tape, but I didn't really get a chance to hear it until I was back home in Toronto. As soon as I started playing the tape, I was hit with a raw level of rock I had never heard before. The guitar sound here was heavy and merciless, playing leads that were raw and riffs that were just intense. The rhythm section really drove the band forward without compromise. And then there were Iggy's vocals. They were rough, powerful, passionate, and they almost seemed to distort as his voice got louder with each scream, with each yell. I was completely blown away. And after listening to the album over the next few years, I came to the conclusion, when people ask you what's the greatest rock album of all time, and if I had to actually choose one, this one would be it. I mean, this is the greatest rock album of all time. This album merges the garage rock sound of the 60s, that rawness, with the heavy rock sound that was emerging at the dawn of the 70s, but it's along with these sort of avant-garde experiments that were from the jazz world. I mean, this album is proto-punk at its best. Now, at the beginning of 1970, the Stooges were struggling because their 1969 self-titled debut did not sell very well. Elektra Records felt that their fellow Detroit band, another proto-punk band, the MC5, should receive more promotion because they were selling better. But the Stooges were still encouraged to record another album. Don Galucci, who had been the former keyboardist in The Kingsmen, Louie, he was assigned as the producer. The album was recorded at the Elektra Studios in Los Angeles between May 11th and May 25th, 1970. Now, the initial recordings did not sound very good to the band, and Galucci had really liked what the band had done live, but he really didn't know what to do, so he just said, wow, I'm going to throw the rulebook out the window here. I'm going to rip up the carpeting and everything else that's kind of soundproofing, and we're going to set up everything in the studio to kind of replicate a live gig. And essentially the band was doing a live concert in the studio, and Iggy was given a handheld mic to sing through. Now, this setup is what gives this album a unique, loud, and gritty sound. Now, let's talk about the actual songs in the album. The album starts out with 3 absolutely fierce tracks: Down on the Street, Loose, and TVI. Down on the Street starts immediately, like just when you turn on the album, bang, with the band hitting a groove with Iggy yelping. When the chorus comes in, both the volume and the intensity get turned up. Everything distorts more with the volume, and including the vocals. This sound definitely has to do with the way everything was set up live in the studio. Ron Ashton's fiery, fuzzy lead guitars and riffs are something of just pure beauty, and they kind of feed off and match the intensity of Iggy's vocals. Now, the same vibe continues on the second track, Loose, but the speed and the intensity is picked up. The guitars in the rhythm section, they do not let up, and of course Iggy doesn't either. And then we have what, in my opinion, is the greatest rock song of all time, TVI. Okay, well, it might be tied with Whole Lotta Love by Led Zeppelin. Now, no song, in my opinion, is more balls to the wall than TVI. I mean, this is how the song starts. And the the song just heats up from there. The band pounds forward with no mercy and no compromise. This is the sound that makes this band legendary. And, after a battle between Ron Asheton's leads and Iggy's yelps and screams, the band kind of congealed together on a pure riff focal point that Iggy covers again and screams. And then after an awkward moment of silence, we are back to the main riff before things wind down. Please listen to TVI if you do nothing else today. The 3 opening songs on Funhouse are the foundation upon which punk rock was built on. People who would lead the underground scenes in London and New York, they were definitely listening to this. Now, after those 3 incredible opening tracks, you have to take it down and pace a little. So the band plays a blues-inspired number called Dirt. But Iggy and the band are still fierce and uncompromising. It's the kind of blues that's just, you feel like you're at the bottom of the barrel in life and you have to deal with your issues. It's fantastic. So that kind of ends side 1. Side 2 is where things get weirder. It starts out with 1970. Now, 1970 is also a rocking track where Iggy screams all the time, "I feel alright." A line in the song actually states, "Radio burning up above," but there were a group of Australians who heard Radio Birdman up above, so they decided to name their band Radio Birdmen. But what makes 1970 interesting is it has this kind of jazzy groove to it, and a saxophone comes into the end of the track that plunges the song into chaos. Now, if only jazz fusion in the 70s had gone more of this direction, I would absolutely love it a lot more than I do, though I do like some jazz fusion. Now, the next track is the title track, Funhouse. At over 7 minutes, the band play along with the sax player, and they jam on this very kind of intense, it's jazzy, it's funky, but it's heavy, this groove. Everything about this track is just incredible. I don't know how to describe it. It's like a post-apocalyptic garage rock version of James Brown. Now, the final track is LA Blues. This is just pure avant-garde noise. Guitar, feedback, bass, drums, vocals are all trying to make as much noise as possible. This is like a proto-punk homage to Albert Ayler. It is fantastic. This album is relentless and beautiful in a really twisted way. This series of songs is how I wished more rock music sounded. And again, it is that live in the studio recording that gives this album such a unique sound. Now, the album was released on July 7th, 1970, and like their debut, it did not sell well. Steve Harris, who was the senior vice president in charge of marketing at Elektra Records, tried to promote the album, but he was met with serious resistance. One of the higher-ups said to him, "Oh my God, isn't Elektra a company of beautiful and wonderful and classy music? What are they doing with this?" And soon the band would fall apart for a couple of years due to Iggy's heroin addiction. They would come back together again with Raw Power in 1973 with a slightly different lineup, and then they would break up again in 1974. But the album would have a long-lasting impact. One can hear the roots of punk, no wave, goth, grunge, hardcore, noise rock, garage rock, revival, and punk jazz. The influence on side 1 can be heard in The Damned, The Dead Boys, Black Flag, The Cramps, The Birthday Party, The Laughing Hyenas, Mudhoney, L7, The New Bomb Turks, and The White Stripes, just to name a few. And then side 2's jazz-inspired chaos can be heard in James Chance, The Minutemen, Saccharine Trust, Mission of Burma, Sonic Youth, and Soundgarden. Musicians who praised this album as one of their favorites include Henry Rollins, Marquis Smith, Nick Cave, Michael Gira, Buzz Osborne, Joey Ramone, Steve Albini. Jack White stated that Funhouse is the greatest rock and roll album ever made. I will always feel that. It's a brilliant, brilliant record, and I don't think it'll ever be topped. And I have to agree with Jack White. This album is passionate, at times brutal, and always uncompromising. It is at the foundation upon which so much of the music I like is built upon. Please do yourself a favor and check out Funhouse by the Stooges. It truly is the greatest rock album of all time. Thank you for watching 20th Century Music and Arts. Please like, share, subscribe, and or comment. What do you think about the album Funhouse?